It's learning to live with the grief and being okay with that. Because I think for the longest time, I wanted to just shove it under a rug and push it away. But it was in those moments when I did that, that it always came back tenfold. And can I just say it comes back at the most inopportune moment?
Welcome to The Narratives of Suicide, the podcast where we bring hope, community, and a voice to those who've lost to suicide. It's where we dispel the myths of suicide. We dispel historical discourses and constructs that have been steeped in history for a very long time, and we're here with hope, love, and support for everyone out there who needs to listen to this podcast. I'm so sorry you're here, but I do hope it can give you something to use in your healing process, to be able to pick up the pieces of suicide and put them back together again in the best possible way that you can. So everybody, we're here today with Crystal, all the way from Utah in the US. Crystal very sadly lost her eldest sister to suicide 2 and a bit years ago. So we welcome you with warm arms here to share your story today. And thank you so much for coming and giving us your experiences and being here to help others to hear what you've been through. And yeah, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Sue. I am just truly honored that you would have me on your podcast. And yes, my goal in sharing my sister's story and her beautiful life is that you will hear my story and find hope again in your own story. So yeah, thank you.
Brilliant. Yeah, it's what it's all about, isn't it? And it's unusual as well for us to have a loss of a woman. Many of my podcasts are about men and a lot of women sharing their experiences of losing men. So this is another great opportunity to hear your story, because again, every story is so unique and every relationship is so unique. And so pleased you're able to share this, because I think, it's only the second time I've spoken to somebody that's lost a woman to suicide. So I think that's really, it touches my heart, any story, but it really makes me really interested and grateful that you're here to share yours.
Yeah, thank you.
So 2.5 years ago, so you're still early days, I guess, isn't it, compared to others? And tell us a bit about Gina. Gina was your sister.
Yes, Gina was, oh my goodness. She was, I like to say she was full of excuse my language, but she was just full of piss and vinegar. She was just I had a coworker that described her as the Energizer Bunny. She was just go, go, go. In fact, the same coworker commented saying, oh my gosh, Gina never slows down. And in a good way, that wasn't in a negative light by any sense. But I was yeah, that was my sister. She was constantly moving, constantly wanting to help others, just help in any way that she could. And she was just such a ball of light. And another reason why losing her the way that we did so quickly and so suddenly, it just completely came out of left field and for our entire family, honestly.
Because she was such a ball of light by the sounds of it. And you're the youngest of 8, aren't you? So she was the eldest girl in the family. Yeah, so big family.
Yes, big family, very dynamic family. Everybody has their own personality and just different strengths. And oh my goodness, my mom describes my sister as she was the oldest girl. I have 2 older brothers before Gina. And so she wanted to be wherever the boys were. And she wanted to be seen. She wanted to be heard. And by golly, she was going to be that was just her personality. And so, yeah, it was so just fun to be around her because she was going to speak her mind. There was nothing off limits. She was just going to tell you how she felt. And oftentimes, it would be oh my gosh, I can't believe you just said that. But knowing my sister, it was kind of this breath of fresh air. Man, I need to take and follow her example because it was such a relief to have someone in my corner and in my life to just really be true to who they are as a person and speak whatever it is that they're feeling. Because for me, I tend to like, oh, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. Can I really say that? But for Gina, it was just like, this is who I am. And I'm going to be transparent in how I'm feeling and what I think. And it was this really strong presence and rawness to her that I really want to embody in my own life.
Okay. Has that been since she passed then, or before? Like, just being around her made you more able to be that way?
Yeah, I find myself in moments where I tend to like shy away and like push back and just step back and be like, oh, I don't know if I can say that. But then constantly it's like she's reminding me like, okay, Crystal, like go ahead, like say what you really feel, like do the things that resonate with your heart and your spirit. And in doing so, you will remember me and you'll honor my memory. So it's beautiful, like synergistic flow of remembering her and then also acknowledging my truth and standing in my truth and whatever it is that I'm feeling or facing in that moment.
Okay, so it's an honouring of her since her passing to honour her life and her spirit and her personality through your own allowing yourself to be true to that, true to yourself. And so it's a remembrance thing and an honouring of her life, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it was completely left field, you said. It was completely no warning signs, anything?
There were definitely, looking back, there were times leading up to her passing because just again, remembering her, we all knew that she was struggling. And in fact, when it was December, the Christmas before she passed away, she was recently divorced at that time. And her children were teenagers and young adults. And unfortunately, they wanted to stay with their dad. Their dad lives about 3 hours away. So they weren't even close to be like pop in for a visit and just say hi. And that really sort of took its toll on my sister. She kind of felt like she was stripped, her words, not mine, stripped of her role as a mom. And being a mom myself, I can't even imagine what that must feel like of just questioning everything and feeling so left out and so alone, even though you have that family dynamic that you had growing up. But it's different when you have your own children and you have their personalities and you're sort of feeding off their energy too. And you're the mother figure. And so you're the mom. And so you're trying to balance out everything in the day to day. And so having been newly divorced and having that experience of having her children decide to live 3 hours away was just really, really rough on her.
Yeah.
But I bring up that Christmas because before she passed away, she was staying at my mother's. And I remember I was out Christmas shopping for my family. And as we had said earlier, I come from a large family. I'm the youngest of 8. And so the idea of having to buy all of my siblings presents, it's not going to happen. Like, I'm just being real. Like, I would go broke if I had to buy every single one of my siblings a present. But I remember seeing this beautiful wooden sign. And as soon as I saw it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to get this for Gina. And I have to get this for myself too. And what it says on it is find your happy. And I remember going downstairs where my sister was staying and walking up to her before Christmas. And I said, Gina, I got you a gift. And she looked at me like, what? Why did you give me a gift? You know, we don't give each other gifts. And I said, in that moment, I looked at her straight in the eye and I said, Gina, I see you. I see the struggles that you're going through. And yes, you're right. I don't know what it's like to be divorced. I don't know what it's like to have my children choose to live 3 hours away and spend all their time with their dad and to have it feel like your role as a mother was stripped away from you. And now it's whenever I want to see you, I'm going to come down, but it's never going to be this willing participant, give and take sort of thing. And I just remember I said, look, I got you a gift, and I showed it to her. And as soon as she read what was on it, the find your happy, she started to cry. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, wow, because in that moment, I really believe that I did see her. I did notice the struggles she was going through. And even though I didn't have that personal connection, she was still my sister. And I still wanted to let her know, like, hey, I see you and I love you. And like I said, she was just crying because that was the first time in a long time that I think someone had actually saw her, let alone a family member that acknowledged all of the struggles that she was going through at that time.
Right. I guess with being such a beam of light as well, she probably gave off that and everyone assumed she was okay, maybe a bit. She just lived that life of that she'd always done, put maybe a mask on, and I'm guessing.
Yes.
So everyone had, maybe she was okay.
Yeah, the months leading up to her passing, it was interesting because we really thought she was sort of coming out of it, in the sense that we knew that she was struggling. We knew that she was in this dark place, but we were thinking to ourselves, like, okay, the things that she's doing, like she was going to counseling at the time, and they had even prescribed her some medication. So we were thinking, okay, this is all sort of coming together now, and it's slowly but surely like turning a corner for her, and it's working. And in fact, our oldest sibling, my brother, he just had opened up a dental practice that March. And the weeks before my sister's death, I remember him saying, I got my sister back. My sister's back, because she was her usual self. She was, grabbing a broom and helping him sweep. They had this big celebration of the opening of his dental practice, and she was welcoming everybody that was coming into the office and saying, hi, how's it going? My name is Gina. And just back to her bubbly self. And I remember very distinctly my brother saying, we got my sister back. Like, she's back. And just remembering that ball of light that she always was and still is, to see that in her again. It was such a relief. And again, that's why this is all the more heartbreaking, because we really had felt as a collective whole, as her family, like, okay, we're working it and we are helping her and we're giving her the strength that she needs and the tools that she can use to help herself. And then in turn, we can come together as a family and get through this, help her transition to this new phase of her life. And unfortunately, that just wasn't the case.
Wow. So there was a period of seeing her emotional well-being go downhill after the divorce, and then you saw the coming up again of her bubbly self, bright light, even to the point where you all recognized you might have gotten over the worst of it with her. She might be gotten over the worst and she was improving again.
Yeah, exactly. And it was just like my brother said, we got our sister back. We got our sister back. Like, we really felt the weeks prior to her passing that, like, okay, we've turned a corner for the better, in the sense that all of these steps that we have taken as a collective whole to get her the help that she needs are coming full circle, and they're working, and it's good.
Wow. And then it was a real shock from that place, a real shock to hear.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It was an absolute shock. And in fact, it was, I don't know if I told you this before, but it was the day before my birthday when my sister took her life. And so my mother called me that morning. And, my mom, we speak all the time, if not daily, definitely weekly. But so it was not unusual for my mother to call me. But as soon as I picked up the phone and heard my mom's voice, I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know what. And then she proceeded to tell me that my sister had taken her life that morning. And I was just in complete shock. I mean, we all were. And it's still a complete shock. Like, I look around and think, okay, well, she's at the gym. She loved to exercise and just be active and move. And in my mind, it's like, okay, well, she's there, but I have to remind my heart, like, no, she's gone.
Yeah, it's different for everybody, isn't it? Depending if, again, the lived experience of partners or people you live with when they go, there's a different reality to that, isn't there? They're missing every day. And I think with my brother, similar feelings, because I didn't live with him anymore. So day to day, I can pretend, go on and get myself caught up in stuff. And then it hits me again really quickly. Like, oh, really? Because there's not that constant reminder, but it's always there in the back like a cloud, isn't it? And just waiting to pop back out again. And it's just the complexity of everyone's different relationship with grief, isn't it? How it affects us. And certainly it sounds as if that was going on with you, or still is, just this whole surreal, I feel that all the time, this surrealness, the surreal sense of, really? Did that actually happen? And it might be to do with that as well, because did you live very close to each other?
Yeah, we live about, I live about 10 minutes away from my mom. So I was able to spend a lot of time around my sister, especially towards the end, unknowingly. And I would go over there with my daughter, and my daughter just loves being at grandma's. I mean, what grandchild doesn't like being at their grandma and grandpa's? But yeah, she loved going over there, and she loved seeing Aunt Gina and, being around her and just playing with her and just doing all the things with her. And that was, again, a really hard moment for me when I had to tell her that she was gone.
Yeah. And your daughter's 5?
Yeah, she was 3.
Yeah.
She had just turned 3 that January of that year in 2019. And so that, again, was really, really hard for me. And I remember I was in the bathroom at that time, and my daughter came in and she goes, "Mommy, why are you crying?" And I said, well, to be quite frank, I didn't want to tell her. I was just like avoiding it. I'm like, how do I tell my 3-year-old that my sister is no longer here? Let alone, how do you explain to a 3-year-old that she took her life? Like, it was just like, I don't know. And so I was talking with my husband, and I'm like, do we tell her? If so, how do we tell her? And so she came in and she asked me why I was crying. And I finally just mustered up any courage that I had, and I had to tell her. And so I told her, I said, I'm crying, honey, because Aunt Gina has died. And she looked at me and she says, why? And I said, honey, I don't know. But I just know that she was really sad. And she paused, and then she started to smile. And in my mind, I was like, why are you smiling? Like, I just told you that your Aunt Gina is gone. Why are you smiling? And I asked her, I said, honey, why are you smiling? And she goes, Mom, does that mean that Aunt Gina is with Grandpa Lanny? And Grandpa Lanny is my dad. And I said, yes, she's with Grandpa Lanny. And she just said, okay. And she ran out of the bathroom. And it was this beautiful moment where I realized that even though she's gone, she is safe and she's in good company. And she gets to experience being around these people that we love and that are no longer here. And so it was really this bittersweet moment between me and my daughter, and having her remind me that it was going to be okay. But ultimately, that my sister was in good company, that she was no longer in pain, that she was no longer sad, but that it would be okay.
Oh, just the purity of a child, the simplicity of that age. It's almost like that. It's okay, Mummy, but she didn't say that. She didn't say that as much, did she?
Right. She didn't say that. She just reminded me, like, she's with Grandpa Lanny and it'll be okay. She was off, and it was as simple as that. And it really was just this so touching moment where I was like, yep, okay.
Yeah. So that helped you at that point to hear that, didn't it? Comforted you?
Yeah, absolutely. It gave me so much peace and so much comfort. And just knowing, like, yep, she is in good company. And she's, like I said earlier, she's safe, and it'll be okay. I'll be okay. And we'll navigate this complexity as best we can.
Wow. So how did you negotiate that complexity? Where did you go from that initial shock? Tell us the journey from there. What opened up for you there?
Yeah, there were so many things that I had to, first and foremost, give myself grace, because there were so many moments when I would unmeaningly lash out at my husband, or I would lash out at my daughter, and my husband would very lovingly say, Crystal, whatever it is that you're mad about right now or you're upset has nothing to do with this thing. It's because you're grieving and you're mourning the loss of your sister. And it was in those moments where I was like, no, but I'm mad. And again, it would just be like, no, you're not. He's like, yeah, you're mad, but your grief is sort of manifesting itself as anger in this moment. And I was like, oh, okay, I can see that. I can see that now.
Great.
And just the different tools that I used, I would journal a lot. I would turn to scripture. I would turn to, the Bible. I would turn to things that my sister enjoyed doing. I would find comfort in doing those things that she enjoyed doing. And to be quite frank, it's not easy. It's not easy, as you know all too well. It's like you're on this roller coaster of like one moment you're okay, and the next moment a song will come on the radio and you just start crying. And it's all part of the journey, but reminding yourself that you will be okay. It's learning to live with the grief and being okay with that. Because I think for the longest time, I wanted to just shove it under a rug and push it away. But it was in those moments when I did that it always came back tenfold. And can I just say it comes back at the most inopportune moment when, I'm at the grocery store and I just start crying, or I'm somewhere else out in public and I'm like, oh my gosh, I shouldn't be crying right now. People are looking at me like, why are you crying? I'm like, you don't understand. I don't have time to explain this right now. So yeah, if I could give any support or help, it would be whenever you're in those moments of just sadness, to just sit with it. Even though I know it's hard, I know it's painful, and I know that I would rather be doing 50 million other things than sitting with my grief. But to really honor that and just say, okay, I'm having this moment and working through this moment. Nothing else, just sitting and processing whatever it is that I'm feeling.
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? Because if you're in the middle of a supermarket and it's not the right place, and I've often thought about this in terms of, if you feel safe, it's much easier, isn't it, to sit with the uncomfortableness, the pain, because it's so painful and it's so heavy and it's so horror-ish and almost surreal to the point, the horror, it makes it so surreal. Your brain doesn't kind of want to go there and doesn't want to go to the intensity of it. And I think the safety is really important, isn't it, to do it in a safe space where a supermarket might not be.
Yeah.
So push it under a rug, not quite so much, like gently put it on top of the rug, come out of the supermarket, go home, find a safe space, whether you've got a partner or anybody, or you're doing it on your own with the journal or with something. Then it's like, and they call that self-dosing the grief. So you'll feel more in control for a start, so it doesn't just take over you. You're not ignoring it and shoving it right under the rug for it to just pop out, like you say, in really tenfold in difficult moments, like the anger maybe, or the moments when you then project that onto somebody else, like your husband, because they're really too uncomfortable to just want to keep inside, and your body says, no, get them out. So it kind of pushes them out and projects them to other people. I think that's really important. It sounds like you learned how to do that. Or did anything help you to do that? Was that your supportive husband kind of saying, that's great, I love the way you did that? So
yeah,
hang on a minute there.
Yeah, I would say definitely my husband was a huge proponent of me being able to process it. And because I have obviously experienced losses throughout leading up to my sister's death and processing those. And so I think it was this dual, like he was very intuitive, but he was also remembering my past experiences with how I handled each of those losses. And to also acknowledge that, hey, this is different. And yes, as it should be, but just as a whole, it's different than all the others. In a way, I was talking to another friend and she said this so beautifully on her podcast. She said, Crystal, all of those previous losses were building to the loss of your sister. And when she said that, I started crying because I had never looked at it that way. And so to answer your question, I believe my husband, again, was very intuitive and he knew that these were different, that they were building and unknowingly building on top of one another to allow me to really process this. And remembering my past experiences, because I would whenever I would have this wave of emotion, grief would come, I'd just be like, nope, I'm do something else. And again, it would come back. And the saying goes, what we resist persists. That's definitely the case in this situation.
Oh, yeah. It was all in preparation. It's reminded me of losing my mum 6 years ago before my brother. And my son, he was about 8 maybe. And we'd lost a chicken, right? And he sobbed about this chicken about a year before my mum died. And then we lost a dog 6 months later, a dog we'd had for 14 years, a family dog.
Oh.
And he sobbed, but not as much. And then when my mum died, he didn't cry at all. It was if those deaths had processed what he felt about death it's a chicken, okay? It's not the same as his granny, but he could process it compared to the hugeness of granny. And it was almost as if they prepared him for the hugeness of that. And then my brother, 2 years later, it's like all these preparations of loss because he was allowed to cry about the chicken, because I didn't say, it's only a chicken, stop crying. I went, okay, cry, it's sad,
Yeah.
And I allowed that grief to come out. It almost helped him process death about a chicken rather than having to process it over my mum in such depth, because he was too young. He couldn't have processed it, and he'll carry on processing it in his way. And it reminded me of that, how until you know death, until you've experienced death, it really is something you don't want to think about. You don't want to go there. Why would you? Because it's one of those things that we as society kind of go, no, we're not going to die.
Right.
I'm not going to die. I'm
Right.
live forever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And unless it's forced on us.
Right.
Yeah.
Or you have the opposite, where you're watching your loved one suffer, and not in the sense that obviously my sister, she was struggling through all of these years and all of these moments, but in the sense that maybe they get cancer and they are struggling with that, and you're witnessing that. And so just again, death is so unique to each individual person. And like you said, we all are going to face it. I've concluded that no one is exempt from tragedy in this life. And so being able to simply acknowledge that and say, okay, and it's not in a mean-spirited sort of way. Like, I have friends that are very fortunate. They haven't lost a loved one, but I can hold space for them and still say, it's okay. Their experience is different than mine, and that's okay. And I still love them.
Yeah. This difference then you talk about, what do you see as the difference being between the other deaths you experienced and your sister to suicide? You recognise there's a difference. If you could describe it to people that don't understand the difference, well, how would you describe it, do you think?
Well, so in order to do that, I'll need to sort of give a timeline. And in 2013, I've coined that my year of hell for me, because it was. It was in January of that year, my oldest brother, they were expecting their son. He was 39 weeks gestation, and sister-in-law was getting ready to give birth the following week. And they went through the hospital and they said, I'm so sorry, but he's gone.
Wow.
And so my sister-in-law still had to give birth. She still had to give birth, knowing that that was the outcome. And that was January of that year. And then in April of that year, we lost my dad due to health complications. Mm-hmm. And then in December of that year, I lost my best friend to health complications as well. And so for me, being able to process each loss throughout that year was unique in itself, because each dynamic was unique. I didn't have the opportunity to get to know my nephew. Mm-hmm. But I still had to process that loss, because that had never happened to our family before. And so that was unique. Processing the death of my father and having all of those memories and just times and reflection and going, well, if I would have said this, or I should have said that. And then being able to unknowingly have my best friend help me through that, and saying okay, and even just something as simple as I remember her saying, Crystal, come over, let's go to the movies. After my dad passed away, we had moved back here to Utah. And I remember I was like, no, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. But then I just said, just go. She's inviting you, just go. And it'll be a nice break from the heaviness that I've been experiencing the last couple months as I've been working through the grief and the loss of my dad. And then unknowingly having her death in December of that same year and processing that. So I say that there is a distinction, because in a way, like I said earlier, they were building on top of one another. But each loss was allowing me to process it in real time. And then again, in December of that year, losing my best friend, and then being oh my gosh, I have to process this again and go through this again. And so that's why I say the relationship's unique. The dynamic is so unique. Your relationship to that person is unique, and the memories that you share with that person. And so there naturally is going to be that difference in each of those dynamics, in each of those relationships that you as an individual will work through.
Yeah. So do you see a difference with the suicide grief and the other types of grief? Or do you think they're all just so unique, you can't even compare them because actually they're all so unique in their own way?
Yes, for me, there was absolutely distinction between my sister and then the previous losses because it was just the quickness of it. And thankfully, I say both my best friend and my dad, they passed away from health complications. It was very quick too, but just in the nature of their passing was sudden. And thankfully, because again, I wouldn't want them to suffer. And same thing with my sister. It was quick, it was sudden, and it wasn't prolonged, thankfully. And so being able to, again, just process that and feel those emotions that come up with it and being able to process it in real time. And as you said earlier, if you need to, I like that visual of putting it on top of the rug and just sort of pushing pause, like, okay, pause. I'm at the supermarket. Can't do this right now. But when I get home into that safe place, I can process it. And so, yes, for me, there was a very clear distinction in their deaths, but also how I was processing it and working through that.
It's really about the preparation, wasn't it? The other deaths gave you for your sister's grief. Yeah, for the grieving you've done. You'd almost learned how to grieve in a weird, horrible way.
Yeah, I never thought of it that way. But yeah, it's interesting because it was like, yeah, I guess I was teaching myself unknowingly how to grieve. And up until that point, I didn't know how.
Interesting, isn't it? Yeah, I find that really interesting because we're not taught to, are we? I'm finding it that.
Yeah, right. Nobody, like you said, nobody's taught this. And even if you are taught it, I kind of feel like we were talking about earlier. It's like, yeah, it's going to happen one day, but I don't want to deal with that right now. Who wants to deal with it before it happens? Like, it's just human nature, honestly.
Yeah, and it's just like, it's not going to happen to me. That I very much feel like that. It won't happen to me. That's not going to happen to me. That happens to other people. And then...
Yeah, that happens to other people. And yes, I couldn't agree more.
Bam, it does happen to us. And then bam, we're like, okay, I've got to deal with this now. And then you've learned how to do that, literally on the job. Learned it by feeling your feelings, experiencing your experiences, having the support of your husband, which sounds great, and your daughter. Yeah. Sounds great. And the rest of your family.
Yeah.
Because with a lot of you, that could be a nightmare, couldn't it? I'm just thinking.
Oh, yes. It was interesting to say the least. But I will say, so my brother-in-law, my sister's husband, he was saying at my sister's viewing, her funeral, because we all got up and shared stories about my sister. And he said afterwards, he said, you know, what's so fascinating is every single one of you had unique stories about your sister. And each of you thought about her in a different light. And you each had a different relationship with her. And so that to me was extremely beautiful, that in spite of the, you know, like you said, in spite of that challenge, there's 8 of us. Like, they're just, it can be a lot to process. It can be a lot to handle. You know, just ask my husband. Trust me, he's like, you guys can be a lot. He's like, I'm not going to lie. And of course, I grew up in it, and I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't understand. Yeah. Like, trust me on this one. You guys can be a lot to handle. But it was just so beautiful for my brother-in-law to say that, because it really put it into perspective. Like, yes, we all have unique ways of processing my sister's death, but also how our relationship to her and the stories that we shared and still share to this day. Like, we'll constantly say like, oh, I remember when this, or this time I remember this. And it's just really beautiful, even though it can be sort of crazy and chaotic, to say the least. We're still able to really bond and come together as a family as we collectively mourn the loss of our sister.
Continuing the bonds with her as a family. It sounds like you're really continuing to We do that as our family. We might eat and we leave 2 chairs for Mum and Andrew at the table. It just feels so weird going out with just 4 of us. It's so odd.
Mhm.
And there's always been 6 to suddenly go to 5 to 4 is just the weirdest experience. And you always have to put the chairs there because they're still there in spirit. And that's that continuing bond, isn't it? Of recognizing they're still part of the family and we're going to still honor them as part of the family.
Mm-hmm.
Lovely, you can do that. I love the way you said that as well. The uniqueness of grief just demonstrates as well in the uniqueness of your relationship. And that's why it's going to be different grief for everybody, because your unique relationship with Gina was your unique relationship.
Yeah.
And the love you had for her was unique. And then that will go through to the grief, won't it, of how much all of you are grieving differently, because everybody grieves differently in families. And that can cause so many problems kind of in the shoes when everyone grieves differently. But when we start to recognize everyone grieves differently and it's okay, that can really help us, because we go, okay, they're just doing their grieving thing. They might look really angry,
right,
but they're doing their grieving thing. And I've got to let them do their grieving thing.
Yeah.
And hold them in that space and if they need it. But that's really difficult to do. I know that's can be really difficult to do, but it sounds like you've all gone through it really well in terms of that connection of family unit.
But I would be doing myself a huge disservice if I said like it was flawless, because clearly it wasn't.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating because as we were approaching the 1-year anniversary of my sister's passing, in my mind, I was like, okay, we're all going to come together and we're going to meet up at the cemetery and where my dad and my sister are buried. And we're just going to share this moment as a family. And then that didn't happen. It sort of fizzled out. But in my defense, it was all in my head. I hadn't verbalized it. So I was like, why didn't it work out? Oh yeah, because I kept it in my head. But my aunt said something so beautiful, because I was really upset. I'm not going to lie. I was really upset. I was like, why? Like, this is how I wanted it to look. This is how I wanted it. And she said, Crystal, you want everybody to grieve the way that you grieve. And I said, dang it, you're right. You're right. And I was like, you hit the nail on the head. I want everybody to grieve the way that I want to grieve, and this is how we're going to grieve. And she was just very lovingly said, it's not going to happen. Everybody has their own unique way of grieving, and just because you're doing it this way doesn't make someone else's way indifferent or bad or not the right way. Like, nope. Everybody has their unique way, and so do you.
Wow.
And you can't expect others to grieve the way that you grieve. And that was really sort of this sort of lightning bolt moment. I was like, oh, okay, I get it.
Well.
Very humbling.
Yeah, such a lot of wisdom in your family as well. But you listen to them. It's like they say things and you go, oh, okay, yeah, I can hear that. Which is a great ability, if you like. And I'm wondering if, because you're the youngest of 8, you've probably always done that, because I was the youngest of 4.
Yes. I would give myself credit because I'm the youngest of 8. I was constantly, and still am, I'm constantly listening and like, oh, and even growing up, like, what did you just do? Okay, I'm not going to do that because you got in really big trouble.
A lot of wisdom coming in there, though, isn't there? And it's feeding into you, but you're listening and able to then develop your own wisdom. And if it's your auntie, again, it's so much wisdom that comes from experience, isn't it? She's obviously experienced her own stuff. And
yes,
yeah, it just shows how you're speaking as well, about how much wisdom you've got from so many losses, so many difficult losses. And would you say you're a different person now after all those losses? You must be different than you were to start. Would you say you are?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, 100%. And it's interesting because I tend to like not acknowledge the incredible progress that I've made throughout the years. And just even today, where I have to kind of pinch myself and say, Crystal, you're doing the best you can. And that's okay because it's unique to you. And if you're doing the best you can, that's wonderful. And not be like so critical of myself because I expect things to be a certain way or think they should be this way. And that's when I get into trouble. That's when I go down the rabbit hole of sort of beating myself up internally and, oh, I could have done this or I should have said that and blah, 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 blah. The list goes on, but really just simply saying, okay, I'm doing the best I can and it's going to look different from everybody else. And that's okay.
Yeah. So grace, you started off by saying that you've given yourself a lot of grace. We're back there, aren't we, really? How you've given yourself a lot of grace and you still are doing the best you can. I like to add a bit. I'm doing the best I can with what I've got available to me. Because I think in the past, I can say that too, I did the best at the time with what was available to me. Because a lot of the time we think, oh, if only I'd known that, if only I'd known that risk was there. And if I can say to myself, I did the best I could with what I knew, I didn't have a clue. So I did the best I could with what I knew. And there's the grace there and forgiveness, isn't there? And we've gone full circle almost to that place that you're still holding on to that grace that you're developing because of your losses or because of who you're becoming, because of just who you are. And you're just using that to help yourself, aren't you? To grieve the only way that you know how.
Yeah. And I love that you added that piece because it's so true. It's so easy to say that, oh, I could have said this, or looking back even before my sister passed away, oh, I should have said that. Or if I had only known, then I would have given her this huge bear hug and just said, please stay. Yeah. But I did the best I could given the circumstances, given what I know now, given what I knew then too. And just, again, bringing in as much grace as you possibly can.
Oh, great. We've come full circle. It feels like a really lovely place to end. Is there anything else you want to say before we finish? What are you doing, by the way? Because I know I found you on Instagram, scattering.hope, isn't it? What's that about? Tell us about that before we finish.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for asking. Yes, so Scattering Hope is the company that I created to help other families begin to heal after suicide.
Nice.
And that was the download that I kept getting from my sister to start and to help other families process their grief. Just being able to heal, as you know, is so important, and find hope again. And then as I was mapping that out and deciding, okay, this is how I want it to feel and to look, and how I can support other families like mine, I kept getting another download, and that was to also focus on suicide prevention. And I do that in my sister's honor with the sister company to Scattering Hope called Owl and Thistle.
Okay, that makes sense. So people can find you on Owl and Thistle for suicide prevention support.
Yeah.
Or scattering.hope
or Scattering Hope
for suicide loss support. And you do coaching, or what does the company do?
Yeah, so I'm working on getting my coaching certification.
Nice.
And so it's a work in progress. But yes, I would be thrilled to offer that service of coaching and really add even more support to those people that are just really struggling on both parties. Whether you have lost a loved one to suicide, or you know someone that is potentially contemplating suicide, being able to speak life into them and to give them hope. So as we wrap up, if I would have anything to leave with the listener, is that we can scatter hope to those that need it most.
Nice. Scattering hope. Yeah, we can. Yeah, we really can. Yeah. And you just have. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate your time, your honesty, and your hope. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for joining us here today. I hope it served you and given you something for your journey with suicide. Come back and subscribe, like, do whatever you need to do on your platform to help us to raise awareness of suicide, because the more we keep saying the word, the more we can gain support for us left behind, and the more we can raise awareness of the word and how society sees it, and reduce this stigma that's so attached to it. Please get in touch. You can find me on my website, suicidegriefsupport.com. I really want to hear from you. But for now, please take care of yourselves and take care of each other. And remember, we are stronger together.